new positions to appoint them to.
All set.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it is 6:31 and I will call the meeting to order now. This is the only meeting of the year that the superintendent starts because we've not elected a board chair yet. So I'll get us started, and then once we elect a chair, then we'll turn the meeting over to that individual. So we have communications with parents, citizens, and staff for the first 10 minutes. Are there anybody here who'd like to make a comment or ask a question? Celeste, is there anybody on YouTube?
There is nobody.
Okay. Would somebody like to read through our norms?
That could, maybe since David's not here.
We will start and end on time, a maximum of 2 hours, unless there's a good reason for more. We will be prepared for agenda items. The agenda will prioritize the most important issues. We will have time limits on agenda items. All members will have an opportunity to speak if they so choose. We will listen to who is speaking and focus on the issue at hand. We will not micromanage the superintendent. Here endeth the gospel according to us.
Thank you very much, Dick. So we're moving on to board organization. The first item in 4E is to elect a chair.
I move Jim Salzgiver.
Do we have a second? So I'll give it to Cynthia. Okay, so moved by Dick, seconded by Cynthia. Is there any discussion or any other nominations? Okay, discussion? Okay. So all in favor of Jim Salzgiver as BRSU board chair, say aye.
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 Thanks, Dean. Okay, any opposition? Okay, nobody abstained.
I'll abstain,
You can abstain, Jim, sure. All right, so passes. Congratulations, Jim. BRSU board chair, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. All right.
I move David Chandler be nominated as vice chair.
Okay, and actually, question for you: do not nominations don't require seconds, or do they? Actually,
You can.
okay. So we'll ask for a second. Okay, Deb, I saw her first, but all right. Are there any other nominations for vice chair? There's David Chandler coming in just in time.
To be elected.
David, you've just been nominated to be vice chair. Are you willing to serve?
For you, the world. I'll do anything.
Okay, so any other nominations? No, then we'll call the question. All those in favor of David Chandler as vice chair, please say aye or raise your hand. Dean? Yep.
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. So we look unanimous there. All right, now we have the clerk position. Are there nominations for clerk?
I nominate Mr. Richard Dale.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Julie beat you. So, okay. So second from Julie. Any other nominations? No other crazy people out there. Okay. Discussion. So we'll call it all in favor of Richard Dale as clerk. Please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Okay, Cynthia, you?
Aye.
Okay.
Hi, Cynthia.
I'm
Good to see you
abstaining.
here.
Hi,
Okay.
David.
Any opposed? And there's one abstention, Mr. Dale. Okay, so Mr. Dale is our new clerk. Our existing clerk and old clerk.
I move we authorize the chair to sign previously approved contracts, which we do every year.
Is there a second to that?
Second.
Dean? Okay, any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand or say aye.
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 Okay, that's unanimous. Okay.
I move we designate the Rutland Herald and Bennington Banner as the official newspapers
Okay, is there a second
Second.
for that? David? Okay, any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand or say aye.
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 Okay, that sounds unanimous. Great, thank you. Okay, Dick,
Move that we designate town offices
There-
and schools as opposed
all
to.
right, Julie, go for it, yes.
Be you, Dick.
Is there a,
sorry.
is there a second?
Second,
Okay, any discussion? Yeah, on that deck, I was just, when I saw, everybody responded to in the affirmative on that one, so I didn't think I needed to ask for nays or abstentions. So, okay, so on the question of designating posting locations as town offices and schools, all in favor, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, Cynthia, again?
Aye. Sorry.
Okay, all right, that's unanimous again, good. Okay, now we have a more complicated one. Actually, the appointing of policy committee members.
I would
We
serve.
actually need names. So Mr. Dale would say, I think if we have volunteers, then, oh, Michael's joined, good.
Michael,
Hi,
would you like to
sorry
be
I'm
on the
late.
policy?
Just getting home.
Okay, so we have Mr. Dale, Ms. Worley, were you volunteering? Yes, okay. And do we have a third volunteer for the policy
It should be
committee?
someone not from the Taconic and Green.
Yep. Is anybody from Medowee or Dean?
What are we volunteering for? I'm sorry.
This
Policy.
would be for the policy committee. So the committee that looks at our policies and updates. It's not quite
It
as
hasn't
frequent as
met
it was
in
in the
2
past.
years.
I'm sorry.
It hasn't met in 2 years.
Oh,
And the only reason it would conceivably meet is if we opt actually to go in the direction of formal policy governance, which I don't think we have yet done.
okay. I would happily volunteer to do that.
Okay, Michael on that. I think
Thank you for the prompt
to,
there.
to the extent there are other recommended policies that might be relevant at the SU level, that could also come up. But
Sure.
we have a much thinner group of policies at the SU level than we do at the operating district level. Okay, so we have 3 people, Richard Dale, Jane Worley, and Michael Kraus. Any other names? Okay, then all in favor of approving those 3 as members of the policy committee, please say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
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 Okay, that looks unanimous again. Okay, now appoint evaluation committee members. Last year, we didn't have an evaluation committee.
That's because we had a
Um,
brand new superintendent.
Well, that's a big reason, but there's also, I think we're a bit in a quandary. I've been actually spending some time recently talking to, board chairs, talking to Randy about an evaluation process to propose. And so, this year, I think I've got something as a beginning, and I've, started to trot it out to people, and I'm hoping to get an evaluation committee to discuss a little bit and then present to the full board a proposal for superintendent evaluation process this year. So it actually has, the intent is to have it actually be a real thing, not a dramatically time consuming job, but an important one. So I'd really like to have also on that one, someone from each of the districts. So Dean, you're kind of being asked to be a part of the evaluation committee.
I will happily serve on the evaluation committee.
All right,
I will serve.
you'll serve.
Yep.
Okay, there could be 3 members plus as chair, I could just kind of sit in if you want, if somebody else from the TNG also wants to be
I
involved.
think, Jim, because you were a material person involved in the creation of Randy's contract, I think that because you participated with great brilliance in Jackie's final evaluation, I think that you are ideally suited to do it. And I suspect if you follow the procedure from before, the committee will report to the entire BRSU board, and that will form effectively the meeting between you and Randy. If that's going to be your procedure.
Yeah, it's definitely the evaluation. One thing I'm doing right now is I just figured it was time for us to take on the question of exactly how do we evaluate a superintendent in a situation where we have some policy governance boards, some not, some in process. And so I've had a variety of discussions and come up with something that I'm ready to sort of propose. But I need people to bounce it off of. So that's in this case I'm just saying that I plan to be involved with the evaluation committee. I can either be one of the 3 members or I can just be a part of it from kind of just popping in there with the group. So if you're happy with me doing it for being the T&G person on it, then fine, I'll do that. Okay. So the 3 members of the evaluation committee would be Dean, Julie, and Jim Salzgiver. If there are no other nominations or suggestions,
with the intention that the process will be emailed or something, and the final evaluation passed by the BRSU board.
Oh, the board's gonna know about the process before the process happens. And
okay,
and
works for
then
me.
it's gonna the evaluation committee. I just think it's good to have a group together to represent each of the districts and then present it to the board. I think this has to be a board process. The full board has to be involved and very much in it ultimately. Okay. So those 3 people, all in favor of having those 3 people serve on the evaluation committee, please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Okay, great. That looks unanimous again. Yes, or was there anybody? No. Okay. Good.
I move Sue Wilburn be appointed as the BRSU treasurer for FY22.
So we have a second, Julie? Yes. Okay. Any discussion? All in favor, please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Okay. I think that's everybody. Dean, that was you too?
That was me too.
You.
Okay. So that passes unanimously. Now the proposed board meeting dates were in the package. So that's one. Yeah.
I move that we accept those dates.
Okay, Jolie seconded. Are there any dates that popped out at people as an issue? If not, then we'll stick with that group of dates for now. It's actually a couple more dates than we had put on last year. The concept is we'd rather have them on the schedule. We ended up having to add a few meetings. So the idea was let's put down the additional meetings, and to the extent that we don't need to hold one of them, we won't. So it gets it out on everybody's schedule in any case. So all in favor of approving those dates for board meeting dates for the coming year, please raise your hand or say aye.
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 Okay. Yep. That's unanimous then.
I move the consent agenda unless there's an objection to one of the items.
And that is the minutes, the hiring, those resumes that are in your package, plus the teacher contract renewals that were listed. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, Dean. Discussion, which you shouldn't really have with the consent agenda, I guess. Since there are no objections to the consent agenda, then we'll call it. And all in favor of approving the consent agenda, please raise your hand or say aye.
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 Okay, that's everyone. All right. Governance process. These are again.
Can we move them
pretty
all?
Standard.
Since they are standard.
Does anyone object? I think, does anyone object to moving them as a group? Okay. Then yes, we can move them as a group.
So moved.
A second. Julie keeps getting in there quick, you know? Okay, so Julie, so discussion. I did just want to kind of point out that the financial management questionnaire, that again, that's a good item for everybody to take a quick look at. It does, you know, it's more interesting to me because I'm a finance geeky sort of guy. But you know, it's helpful to review as you know, the controls that we have on the system. The memorandum of agreement, you know, that was something Randy had raised earlier. I don't know if there's anything to say about that, Randy. No? Okay.
The
Already
one
been
thing,
approved by all the boards.
the one thing I would say is that the financial stuff is a clear indication that we have one of the best treasurers around.
Bingo.
We definitely do.
I'll second that.
You're very kind.
Touche.
I'll third that.
We'll make it unanimous.
Well, we are kind of flying through the agenda, so we don't, we'll kind of, a little bit later when we talk about legislative and regulatory stuff, Sue can mention something that she sent off recently. Okay. So now we're board updates or actually.
I don't think you voted though on the governance.
Oh,
process.
good point. You're right. Okay,
yeah.
so any further discussion on the group of items? Okay, then all in favor of approving A through E in the governance process, please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. That's
Can I just
everybody.
jump in just for a quick second, Jim?
You can.
I was realizing that we have a new group of people here and that it might be a good idea for people at some point before we close to introduce themselves and say where they live. Because I'm not sure everybody knows everybody. So I just wanted to suggest that.
That's a really good point. That was an oversight. So,
Well,
okay.
it's kind of an oversight by me, I think. So I'll take credit for that oversight and not pass it on to you. But in light of my oversight, I'm now stepping in and suggesting that we do that. So.
I'll take that as well. I'll start with Jim Salzgiver from Dorset, Taconic and Green, BRSU, and VSBA boards. Okay, David?
He's muted.
You're muted.
You're right. Okay, sorry about that. I'm so easily muted. Usually I get shouted down by Dick or
Nice
Jim.
try, David.
Taconic and Green, BRSU, and also VSBA like Jim. And we've been working together probably 12 years now, something like that.
It's been a
So
good partnership.
it's a vaudeville act.
I'm not going to say
Dale.
which one. Yeah, Mr.
Abbott
Dale.
and Costello. Dick Dale, Taconic and Green.
Okay, as I'm saying, Deb Linus
I'm Deb Linus. I live in Weston and Taconic and Green.
and Jane.
Hi, Jane Worley, live in Peru and on Taconic and Green and BRSU. And hi to Cynthia.
Hi, Jane.
We were both parents at Long Trail with kids. So
Yeah.
good to see you.
Let's see you.
Yeah, Cynthia knows a lot of people on the board already, but maybe not everybody.
Yeah.
So now we'll go to Meadowy and with Julie.
Julie Mack, Meadowy.
Michael.
Hi, Michael Kraus with the Meadowy Board. And hi, Cynthia. It's really nice to see you.
That's you.
And Cynthia is our new member here.
Hi, I'm Cynthia Morrissey, the Meadowy Districted. And nice to see everybody here.
All right. You can't see Dean, but a
Yeah.
key member of our board.
I'm Dean. I'm from Winhall, and I still don't have a webcam.
We're gonna have to take care of that somehow.
You can't see Dean, but can Dean see you?
Yes, yes, he can.
Can I ask a question that just occurs to me?
Yeah.
Do we appoint a negotiating committee? They're representatives from the other districts? I mean, how does that work?
That's actually a really good point. We should have one because BRSU has a contract. I think yeah.
I'm not volunteering, I just,
Right?
No,
The
because actually,
Taconic and Green appointed David and me as the holdover negotiating team.
but actually last year we did have a negotiating committee, and last year it was David, Dick, and Jolie,
Yeah, it was, yes.
the
we had Julie.
BRSU.
She was a very key member.
So I think
Even
we
more.
should.
I
I
wasn't
think
on
we
the
should.
BRSU board at that time. I was appointed from my Meadowy position.
Right.
Right, but you still, I think you got voted onto that, sort of in absentia or whatever.
So Julie, how does that work?
I don't think so, because Meadowy and TNG are the ones who've been putting people on negotiations. So that's how Julie was on it.
So do
We
you?
had
Julie,
two
do you-
from
Oh, okay.
TNG and one from Meadowy.
So we don't, even though we have a BRSU contract as well, we don't need a separate, it's an SU wide, so,
That's right, because there's still representatives from both boards.
okay. So we don't really need to do that then.
I don't think so. Celeste, I'm correct about that, right? This is how we've done it in the past?
Correct. And the other part is there's nothing to negotiate this year other than the staff contract.
Okay, I did have last year's agenda where we did include it, but it sounds like we don't really need to, so essentially the negotiations, you're looking at the negotiations team for all of our districts, which is Dick and Julie and David, right?
Julie is shaking her head no, but I think she should be appointed against her will because she's really good.
A nice second.
I'll third that because I also feel like it would be, maybe I'm exaggerating, but just from a perception point of view, to have a member from the Meadowy board included, even ceremonially, if you will.
Right. I think that would be a very good thing if at all possible. Win Hall without any employees, it's not such an issue, but Meadowy with people.
And if Julie is feeling overextended, I don't know that I could offer the same level of competence, but I would be willing to stand in that way symbolically if she's totally unwilling. But
You
I
don't
would
have the
definitely
dead stare,
endorse-
Michael.
I'm sorry?
You don't have that dead stare.
Well, that's why I'm all for you, sister.
Okay, now Jolie, obviously you have a lot of fans, but if you really don't think you can do it, then feel free to say so.
I believe that Meadowy did put forward our new board member, Anthony. I didn't really jump to do anything because I didn't think there was much of anything that needed doing this year. I will gladly be on a committee if it's, an active committee. We'll bring the
Okay.
team back together.
Okay, so the band will get back together. Yeah.
And
Yeah, I think it's
Michael?
Anthony as well.
I just wanted to add, I had forgotten the fact that I believe in our last Meadowy board meeting, Anthony did volunteer to serve
Yeah,
Okay.
text, correct? So
Yeah.
correct. Yep.
Okay, so technically we should acknowledge it at this point that, that David,
Anthony
Dick,
plus-
and Anthony are the committee. However, Jolie's willing to potentially parachute in at some point to the extent that would be useful. So that we can say we're not actually, appointing anybody here. So that's just an understanding. Okay. Great. Okay. Next point, we have a board update, which these are kind of, I think, issues that people may be interested. If anybody has anything to say, also if anybody has anything they want us to cover in a future meeting, feel free to speak. I've made a couple of suggestions to Randy, but which is another way to go about it. You can always ask Randy for, if there are ideas you have. These are a couple of things that have to do with, helping bolster our understanding on like Act 173 and special ed and some of our special programs. But Dick.
Just because I happen to also be a representative to the Scholars Committee, which I don't really know, it's the Restoration Committee. I know that there may be a need to take a look at the budget and authorize the superintendent to add monies for the purposes of proposed reintegration into the school, which might include something like summer school. It might include extra money to support the psychological challenges that might be presented by kids suddenly being in school for more than a brief amount of time, not every day. So the superintendent normally comes and suggests it, but I have a suspicion that the governor is going to do a fair amount of insisting on reintegration of our kids and making up for lost ground. And I think we should try to be as supportive of that as possible.
Now that's a really good, yeah, Randy. Yeah.
I'm happy to sort of expand a little bit. I can give you a few more details, which I think are relevant, Jim, if that's what is appropriate at this time. So Dick's referring to what's being called recovery planning. And there's a lot of work under a very tight timeline that we're needing to do over the next couple of months. First is develop a distress SU level needs assessment, followed by developing a plan. And it covers three primary areas: academic performance, social emotional needs of staff and students, and student engagement. Those are the three primary areas. So, I'll tell you that I don't anticipate at this point needing to request additional funds from you, because we've been receiving information about our ESSER 2 and our ESSER 3 grant funding, for which will extend, the funding goes until September 1st of 2024. So it's essentially 2 more years of funding, and it's a pretty decent amount of money that we're looking at. So I have already started conversations with our central office leadership team, leaders and our principals, and the recovery team will begin to map out what our planning looks like. Don't expect there to be a financial hit to the local budget. However, I am looking forward, once it's completed, to sharing what we're looking at and what our planning is. Where I've got a survey ready to go out to families and to staff about summer programming. I'm thinking about this from a strategic perspective about really what is it that we anticipate our needs being as we return back, and how do we make the most over the next couple of years of this funding, as well as, how do we make the most of the funding to extend beyond the 2 years, right? There's a whole strategic planning and strategic thinking process. So we're just starting that. I'll be updating all boards on that. Dean, I don't typically keep WinHall as updated because your work is different. However, I'm happy to share as much as you'd like. So you can anticipate that over the next few months.
That's going to impact kids wherever they're at school, wouldn't it, potentially?
That's correct. It's about recovery planning starting this summer. So,
right.
And I don't anticipate, I have no plans to continue distance learning as an option for our students next year. So it's about transitioning people back successfully.
Okay, Deb, first, and then Jane.
In the budgeting process, we talked about an executive function coach. Where is that part of this too, or how does that fit in?
It is. So that was funded by ESSER 1 at this point. We've actually changed the name of that to student engagement interventionist. Expanded it out a little bit as we thought more about it. So that's reposted right now. There's a social worker that we've posted. We haven't done a lot of planning, so I haven't posted too much yet. But yes, those are all part of the network we're trying to start to create. One of the challenges is not a lot of people to do the work. So we can have all these great ideas, but if we don't have people to do the work, we may find ourselves in an interesting
And
position.
they're meant to be short-term positions? I mean, they're
Correct.
funded with one-time funds.
Correct.
Mhm.
Jane?
And I have no intention, I'm planning on being very clear about that. We have a purpose for a specific reason, and the positions themselves and our personnel, I don't anticipate keeping.
Okay, Jane, then Michael? Yeah.
I have some connectivity issues, and so I may have missed this. Randy, I know that you mentioned that there was 3 prongs, and I got the first one, and I think the other 2 you said were the socio-emotional learning and then the student engagement. If that's right, if you can confirm that. And pardon my ignorance, but can you kind of talk, I know what socio-emotional is, but I'm wondering more how you delineate that with student engagement.
Sure. So the student engagement, the biggest concern, I think, I wouldn't say the biggest, there are a lot of concerns, but one of the challenges that's happened across the country is related to attendance, engagement with school, truancy, students who've quote unquote ghosted. They're not engaged in school right now. And there's significant concern about how those students are going to successfully return to school. We don't have
thank you.
We don't have a high number. We have only a few, I think 3 students that are really, really completely disengaged. Then we have another whole population that we're really struggling to get engaged, to participate, to show up, to do work, to attend school in any regularity. So we'll be focusing on, how do we most effectively support those students coming back? So we're already thinking about that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Michael?
Yes, thanks. It's a huge undertaking to even contemplate. I just wondered, relative to all of these positions, we had been talking earlier as a board that we won't necessarily need to be involved in any negotiating or contractual committees. But how does that, I just wonder if this will impact in some way on that with us,
It won't, because we can, we'll be, very open and transparent with people about the positions and what we're looking at, what we're doing. But the addition of the positions won't affect the collective bargaining process.
Because they won't be exceeding what is already in place, Randy, or?
They will be exceeding it, but the agreement, the collective bargaining process is an agreement that's developed between the school boards and the teachers. And so it basically provides a set of guidelines that we all agree to follow around working conditions. And I'll just leave it at the working conditions. So most people will be happy with additional jobs for people. That's a positive thing.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Now, on that whole sort of recovery program, I think it's, worth kind of noting that this came up, I got involved a little bit at the state level because it came up with initially the Senator Campion, as the chairman of the Senate Ed Committee, was sort of, it had laid in or been put in his lap to figure out a way to come back from the pandemic for our kids. And there was initially a significant effort having to do with a lot of people from Agency of Ed, the legislature, and the VSBA and VSA and VPA, and all those folks got involved. And the initial intent seemed to be to come up with some great program at the state level that would be rolled out to every district in the state, which got a ton of pushback from folks like the VSBA and VSA and VPA, and all saying that the honest truth is there is no one size fits all to deal with this situation, and you need to put it in the hands of the supervisory unions and supervisory districts as to how to do this. You can provide some guidelines and expectations, but don't tell them how to do their job. So it was kind of like telling the legislature, as school boards, we say we don't micromanage the superintendent. You guys shouldn't either, So So it was an interesting process, and it seemed to be, I guess, Randy, do you, are you, even though it's still a little confusing how it's all coming out, do you think that it's coming out in a way that gives you the room to do what you need to do?
Absolutely. You're right. It could have been very different, but I do feel a sense of ownership over our process. I think it's, well, initially I probably had some reservations about this recovery planning model. I think it's really important work. I would have been doing the work anyway. I'd already started doing the work even before budget season, right? We included money for additional summer programming. I've told you for months about, thinking ahead to what we're going to need moving forward. We've talked about that in a number of our meetings. So the work needs to be done. And we're going to do the best we can with the data and the information we have about our students in our system and build a plan according to those needs. And I think that advocating for more local response on this issue is a good idea, because I would anticipate that other communities will identify different needs based on what's going on in their system. So I think it's good. I want to circle back, Jim, to what you when we started this whole conversation. I want to expand a little bit or clarify a little bit. When Jim said that we were talking about this, part of what we were discussing was me providing you. I won't do it every month, and we can put it on a work plan, but presentations and information, if we continue to meet this way, he mentioned at district specialized programming for students, so that you have an understanding of what we have available, that, for students with autism or students with trauma or significant emotional needs. So you have an understanding of what we're doing. Act 173, I wrote down equity at some point, really diving into the work we're doing with equity, recovery planning, what our district leadership team is working on. So the idea was making a presentation here. If we continue meeting this way, we could record it, and that section could potentially be given or done, shared at a TNG meeting or a MEDOE meeting, and so that board members can have some information. So that was an idea that we were tossing around, and we're still fleshing out. But I just wanted to expand on that, because
Right.
It might be something that you as a board want to talk about, or you think that might be a good idea. But
does that make sense to people? Yeah. So I think, there's so much to keep on top of, as school board members, we need to understand what's going on in the system and understand a little bit more about the nuts and bolts of education without, getting into that micromanaging and all that. It's just, it's good for us to understand. And there are some really big challenges out there. I mean, Randy faces a lot of big challenges that are, have been sent down from the state, or just challenges that we identify within the district. And, our just having a better handle probably makes us better board members.
Yeah, I would totally endorse that point of view, Jim. And I know something recently came up that was actually quite wonderful. I mean, the MEDOE board wrote a letter regarding vaccinations for teachers to the state, and lo and behold, so many other boards must have as well, because this came to pass. And so, yeah, I would love to be kept abreast. It's a lot of information that's going to be, a lot of events going to be unfolding between now and then.
Yeah, and Michael, I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one place where actually the TNG wrote a letter as well. And I think we, and I take some blame for this. I don't think we've coordinated as well as we could amongst the boards and communicated as well. I'm going to try to do a little bit better job of staying in touch with, over the past couple of weeks, I, had a good talk with Jolie and about what was going on, and talked to Jennifer Samuelson about what's going on in Wynn Hall. And, I'm a little more with her, but I'm a little bit more in touch on a more frequent basis. But, it's funny, because I'm dealing with a lot of people who are still think Act 46 was the worst thing that ever happened in the world. And I'm trying to tell them, actually, it was pretty darn good for us, I think. And we need to take advantage of what we gained as a system, to make sure that we're aware of what's going on across the system. So, okay. Now we've got legislative communications. That's in that vein.
Can
Yeah, please.
I just
Julie.
go back to board updates real quick?
Yeah, please.
I just had something pop, something we were talking about sort of reminding me of something that I figured I might bring up here. I don't know if this is the place to do it, and maybe it's just something that we all kick around in our heads for a while, but I feel like I can say now, having a kid who's graduated Meadowy and is soon to be exiting a TNG school, I do think there's sort of a difference in how information is presented to parents about what their options are. And post Act 46, I think now that we all have choice as a choice, I kind of would like to see some equity there across the board of how we educate parents about what they need to do, when they need to do it, and how they need to, what next steps might be.
Yep. Okay. That's is that, Randy, is that done? Well, Meadowy is in a unique situation within TNG.
Yeah, I mean, I think TNG is pretty well dialed in. I've already met with Brooke about Meadowy, Julie. So I think it's, I mean, we can talk, but it's really not, it's not a board. There's no board involvement in that work. I don't think. We can think more about it, but you're talking about just the practices between families and potential schools.
I think that Julie is really talking about a process that gets some feedback from people who are experiencing what policies and or other things that have been foisted upon them. I'm fairly certain that the policies with respect to how much money is potentially available and to whom does get communicated. But I view this issue as exit interviews of parents who have experienced our system from either Windhall or Meadowy or the Taconic and Green, and making sure that we touch base and learn from areas that might have caused some angst or concern throughout that exit process. I think that's what I heard Julie essentially say.
Well, I don't hate that idea, but that's not exactly what I was saying.
I think it sounds, yeah, Michael, go ahead.
Well, I don't want to interpret for Julie, but my sense was that it would be more of an effort from the school board or the school administration to communicate clearly to parents what their steps or options might be with their kids. Is that where you were going with this, Julie? Am I under, because this came up, I remember, at a Meadowy conversation, and our sort of whole interview that we created for the recent town vote also reflects a kind of a concern that I think you've had in an ongoing and appropriate way about making sure that the parents understand clearly and are dealt with equitably in terms of the options available for their kids.
Yeah, I think while as Randy said, it's not really a board role, but to the extent that you guys figure out within Meadowy, is there a way to use board members or use any other resources to make sure that the situation is dealt with in a way that makes Meadowy parents and board members and all comfy? Does that make some sense, Randy? Or
Yeah, I think I just need to better understand. I have some information, but it may not be comprehensive. Okay. So.
I think this is something that probably, this sounds like a very Meadowy specific issue that I'm very interested in seeing it sort of dealt with, but I think that's at this point it makes sense to probably for you guys as, Meadowy board members to kind of make it really clear to Randy what the, what the issues and concerns within the community are, so that she can make sure it's responded to. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I didn't necessarily think I didn't know if this was like a BRSU board level thing or just, I guess I'm bringing it up now because we have representatives from everywhere. And I see it as an equity issue across the supervisory union, just in the differences. I also see it as an equity issue within Meadowy, which is a Meadowy issue that needs to not be talked about here tonight. But I just want want people to be able to exercise all of the options that are available to them, and I don't think that people know how to.
Is the concern that they're being pushed towards, T&G schools versus other things, or or what's going on, or?
No, I honestly, I just feel like it's just not knowing.
Okay.
Like not knowing what to do and when to do it.
I think, if I could ask that, just kind of, get together, make it a little clearer with Randy. I might want to chat with Randy, but at the next BRSU board meeting, we could circle back. This is another just to like, okay, if this is a concern, is it being addressed? If we could circle back to that next time. So that work? Okay. Okay, so if we're, ready to go on to legislative and all that stuff. Okay. Here I did want to talk about, there's this, I've been a little bit more drawn into, legislative issues this year than I ever have in the past. And I think there's, just a phenomenal amount going on that's kind of important important because it can have a significant impact on us. I've kind of been bringing up some of those, points at T&G meetings, but that's not, we need I think a better approach to figuring out how we keep everybody up to date on, is everybody here signed up for the VSBA legislative blog? That if anybody isn't, Cynthia, you're, being a newcomer, it's, that's helpful, but it probably almost feels like overload because there's a lot of, or maybe not. I'm looking for feedback on that.
It could feel like overload if there wasn't so much going on, but there's so much going on that I feel like you need all that information to keep up.
Right. And I'm trying to think of a way, when I was having conversations with as I said, with Jolie as the chair of Meadowy and Jennifer as the chair of Winhall, I said, we probably, even though the VSBA blog could be useful to provide information, it might be helpful to kind of filter that and, and communicate as an SU, okay, what are we doing across the SU on these issues, or how these issues would specifically potentially impact us as an educational system, and figuring out a better way to communicate that. What I've been trying to do in a very, very unstructured way, too unstructured at T&G, is give a couple of comments on what big things are going on in the legislature that could impact us. And, I'm thinking of trying to make that a little bit more structured and maybe not all that different than, what Randy was saying about, okay, issues with, what's going on in the educational system in education, potentially creating having a presentation, taping it, or, and making that available at the other board meetings. The same thing as trying to come up with a way to communicate to the BRSU board, T&G, Meadowy, Winhall, what are the big legislative issues out there, and how could they impact us, and what's being done about them. So trying to figure out if that sounds like a useful exercise to go through. So, Deb,
Well, and also, when do you need us to contact our legislators, each of us.
That's
That's
definitely part of it. Dick, you, yeah.
Part of my problem is that the legislature starts down a path, runs into a bit of a roadblock, changes the path, and so the big issues haven't gone away, but the solution that might dramatically change the way we would respond regularly changes. And
Yep.
Trying to keep up with that regular change it makes it more complex. That's part of the reason why I think the blog is so difficult, because it constantly is talking about updates to updates to updates, sometimes terribly contradictory.
Yep. Celeste, could you actually make me a co-host so I could share a screen here? But
Sure, hold on.
because that's what I'm trying to figure out, how to, you know, we were all part of with H81, which is the statewide employee negotiations, you know, school employee negotiations, that the Taconic Green BRSU sent communications to first the House and then the Senate, asking them to do things on that. I also, you know, I testified on that in the Senate and sent you guys, you know, my written testimony from that, which, you know, my concern is this can be just more than you want to see. I'm trying to figure out a way to potentially make it a little less, you know, to make it easier for people. And anyway, this is, you know, one thought, trying to come up with, you know, maybe on a periodic basis for, you know, for all of the districts. So for BRSU, TNG, you know, all the districts, you know, Medowee and Windhall, you know, sort of where do things stand? What are big things that could impact us, and trying to provide a sort of regular update, you know, periodic update for the boards, you know, trying to make it more, how could it impact us here in the BRSU schools and districts. So, you know, yeah, please.
That's why they call it sausage making. I mean, it's probably a good idea to sort of be following the issues that matter to us, because maybe at some of those junctures where they're about to change something, our input might make a difference.
Well, that's what's happened. You know, it's interesting because, you know, here, okay, this is something I just put together, you know, today actually, but you know, thinking of a way to provide info, and I can send this to you, you know, by email so you can look at it. But this was, you know, what are some of the issues, the H81, the statewide healthcare bargaining that you guys have been pulled into, some pupil weighting factors that's, you know, the weights that used in equalized pupils. Universal free school meals is an issue that David and I were just writing to the legislature today on. And, you know, some of these issues are, you know, I think if board members take a look and say, this is really important, then you can make your own decision to, you know, we could always say it might be helpful to contact legislators, but you can also make your own decision. The Universal Free School Meals, Community Schools Act, you know, so here are, you know, 4 things that are in play right now that are significant. On the negotiations, the last negotiation didn't turn out very well for us, and it could be a lot better. There's a bill in there to try to fix it, and it's been running into some real headwinds trying to really get the fixes done. The pupil weighting factors, that's for an example, there's a group of, we didn't take an official role in it, but I've been there's a group of school board members that's now up to it's like 30 to 40 school board members around the state who formed a group to really push hard on the weighting factors. Now, those are basically schools that would have a benefit from the new weighting factors being put in place. And I'm there as you know, Windhall would actually be negatively impacted. Our other districts, you know, are kind of not as so significantly impacted. But one thing I found very interesting is this group of 30 or 40 school board members getting together on weekly calls, talking about it, getting riled up, they're actually having an impact on this, because this is an issue that, the basic idea is, a study was done with new weights that would more accurately, be used in equalized pupil calculations, so that, when, kids in poverty right now get a very small increase in, equalized pupil counts. And the study done by UVM and some other folks, which is a really good study, suggested that it should be much larger, the impact for schools and kids in poverty. So this is a way to move towards, and this was all tied into Act 173, which was special ed. And the idea was, if we're going to put a block grant in place for special ed, we need to make sure that we're accurately providing the right amount of resources to different schools based upon their student population. So this is one that, honestly, where it is about a month ago, the head of the, Senate and House said, oh, well, we're just going to put this on the back burner for the year. People went nuts, including this group called the Coalition. It's been called the Coalition. And it went from being put on the back burner to actually having a strikeout brand new bill that made it through the Senate and is actually out there to have a, it's not an immediately putting it in place, but what it's doing is putting together. They said, okay, we heard people like, Dick Sears saying, and Brian Campion saying, we've got to do something on this because, people are really hot under the collar. And so it made a difference. And they actually have a bill now where there's, that looks like it has legs, that would put together a study group from the legislature, Agency of Ed, with support from VSBA, VSA, VPA, and all those, to come up with a plan for implementation of the weights by December. Within the bill right now, it says for the legislature to take action by January 2022 on the implementation. This went from totally backburnered to actually something happening. We've had a little less luck with some of the other legislation, but it shows that if you feel strongly about something, you can, we're a small enough state that you actually can impact outcomes sometimes. Now, I've been trying to impact some outcomes and not had much luck on some of them, but but you can. Universal free school meals. This is just, this has been around for years, and it's come up and has become extremely real, where the thought is to have schools become responsible for providing free breakfast and lunch to every child in the school, irrespective of the free reduced lunch sort of designations, which has a whole lot of issues. It would also, it's been scoped out to expected to cost between $24 to $40 million per year to the Ed Fund. And the current bill that's going through the Senate and went through Senate Ed and is in appropriations right now says, to the extent that you can't get federal monies to cover it, the school districts will. So this is a straight, hit the Ed Fund sort of impact. So that's why David and I were writing.
Another unfunded mandate.
Exactly.
So Jim, my reaction to all this is that it's better for us to have too much information than too little. We can self-select what we don't want to look at, but it's very nice you make it available. And if you don't want to take the time to write it up, just giving us an overview during these meetings is also very good. And the second thing I wanted to add is that I'm wrapped up in my own world, so I don't always know when the timing is right that I should reach out and respond to something. So sending out notifications to us, and you can include me on that. Maybe if everyone wants to self-select on that, but sending out notifications of situations where our involvement is urgent and would be timely, if we have an opinion, that's very helpful to me. So I don't know how you feel about that, but
others agree. Jane? Yeah.
I second that motion.
Jane, did you have
I just was going to ask a question.
Yeah.
Yes, hold one second, please. Okay. Sorry, I have connectivity issues right now, so hopefully you guys can hear me. One of the things I wondered about, and this may seem just really ignorant, because like what David is saying, it's important that we, I think, be kept abreast of all these things. But one of the things I wonder, as far as like being supportive to you and maybe helpful to the board with putting some things in action, has it been your experience that when you see the bills, is it even possible that somehow they're grouped into is there any kind of way to look at the bills as being grouped in any way? I ask this because what some organizations will do when it comes to legislative issues is kind of say, oh, these are people who are interested in this sort of bill.
Right.
You know, and then that's going to be the little semi-action committee that might respond to certain bills and things that are going through. And I wonder if that's helpful. You know, there's that kind of talk about how you look at policies too, which I'm not trying to get into that conversation, but just maybe where there's an expertise and the manpower is able to coalesce more quickly on certain issues.
Yeah, I think the tough thing here is with the legislature, it's a shotgun. You know, there are things coming in all directions. And a big part of it is trying to assess whether bills are real. There have been, as far as on the education front, you know, I threw up 4 there, and you know, at the end of you'll see at the, you know, end of that little note, and I'll send this to you guys later. And I welcome questions on this stuff. I'm spending probably too much time on this stuff nowadays, but I like it, so I'm happy to do it for, you know, for all our districts and stuff. But at the end, you know, also 2 literacy bills, one about school facility funding. And in total, this is the legislative period where they said, oh, we can only do COVID-19 stuff. There have been over 100 bills impacting education that have been presented so far this session. So this is sort of the ones that, you know, right now we're in with the legislature, they're a crossover, the thing where, you know, some of the bills will just die for this session, and I'm trying to point out the ones that appear to continue to have life. And you know, and yeah, Michael.
I just wanted to say this is enormously helpful for me, even just being able to glimpse the things that you shared with us on the screen. You know, I'm often catching the information, and I'm not bragging about this, you know, from Vermont Public Radio, and I'll listen to Bob Kinzel or whatever his name is interviewing people. So if you can provide us as we go without adding to the already heavy burden that you're carrying, it would really be a useful, super powerful, I think, tool for all of us. So
good. Okay, Jane, did you?
I just was curious, and you may have already said this too, but I'm not sure if I heard, but are you aware of like maybe how other boards, maybe not only throughout the state, but throughout the nation, maybe handle this? Do they handle it in a different way as far as the mechanisms for communication and action?
Well, actually, you know, David and I are a little bit more, David and I are the reps from the Bennington County region on the VSBA board. So we end up getting a lot more statewide information, a lot of information on this kind of legislation and all what's happening. We will get sometimes just to the VSBA board a call to action, and we often don't pass that on to you guys just because, you know, we don't want to burden you guys anymore. But there are some things where, you know, it's probably better if you guys know it. You know, like Michael said, there are a lot of these issues that what I'm trying to do is figure out a way to communicate information that will be helpful to you guys and not a burden. And if you don't want it, if you can't read it, don't read it. But trying to be helpful. But as far as those calls to action, you know, we can pass them on to you. You can give a read, and if you do as you like. You know, if we're sending out a communication like we did on, you know, H81, the statewide healthcare negotiations, on that, if it's coming from the board, then you guys all have to be aware, preferably beforehand. But, you know, hopefully by having these kind of discussions, we'll know where the board stands, and it'll be easier if we, sometimes it's we need something out by tomorrow morning. And, in that sort of case, we can try to be reasonable about assessing how the board's viewing an issue, try to put something together, make sure you guys are informed, But, generally, when I provide stuff, if you guys haven't approved it, then, like Herb and I on the H81 stuff, it was, didn't want to say we're speaking for the board unless we're confident we're speaking for the board. That's the tricky spot. Yeah, Deb?
Well, maybe the most helpful way for you to do that for us is that, I find the VSBA blog really helpful. And you're right, it is pretty dense, but if you follow it from time to time, you can keep track of what's going on. But maybe after those come out, would be a good time for you to give us your comments on how those would affect us.
Okay.
Or what, then we would all have that background. You wouldn't have to start from scratch. Refer us to that and then tell us what does
That's
it
good,
mean?
but sometimes you need a little more, this is, let me just say, let me try to, because we're, spending a bit of time on this, but I think it's important to me anyway, that let me give it a shot. I'll send you guys this note that I just did today, and you can give me feedback on it. And I'll try to, my goal would be to try to do this sort of thing before the whole group of board meetings happen in all the districts, so that, send it to the district chairs or whatever, they can decide if they want to use it in their board meetings. Randy, sir.
David, you can go first if you want, and then I
Or
can.
David?
Just wanted to say that one of the things that's very helpful when there's a call to action, someone reaches out. Sue Saglowski reached out last week and said, if somebody works, if this senator is involved in your area, then you better reach out. And I really had no idea what to say. And so when then I see you who immerses himself in these issues, and I see the response that you wrote, and I went, oh, okay, I now know what I want to say. And I didn't say the same thing you said, but I tried to, but I think we were very much on the same page. And I think that's helpful. So I don't think you need to hesitate, but you're not going to influence us if we don't agree with you. And if we disagree with you, then you may not like it, but if we respond, then we will disagree with you to the same person.
Which is, it's
don't think
helpful to
that's
get a
gonna happen
disagreement
very
as well as
often.
an agreement.
Yeah. Anyway, it's very helpful when you formulate your ideas and help us understand what the issues are at play, and then we can come up with our own opinions.
Okay, so we'll just start that as a new little thing. We'll see how it works, and feel free to give any kind of feedback. Randy, did you? Yeah.
Yeah, so I don't know if it's appropriate for me to speak up about this, but I feel like, as I think about this idea of the legislative work and your voice and your perspective as a board, I think about my responsibility to that as well. And I haven't even talked to Sue about this at all, so she and I might see this differently, or she may offer me additional information. But, when I look at that list that you just created, I think about the intersection of all of those bills, which is my job. I think that that's part of my responsibility, is to be considering the big picture of our system. So I want to share some thoughts. Sue, I'd love to hear from you about whether you think I'm off on any area, because usually we would talk about this before I'd say something in a meeting like this. But, I conceptually, I love the idea of universal schools, universal meals for students. I also love the idea that somebody funds it, and it's not going to end up coming to our local budget for me to have to decide how to pay for the meals and keep a balanced budget and keep a tax rate down and make all of that work, right? So as I think about that, I would make that comment, and I would add to it that within the next fiscal year, we're going to be looking at a shift in to a census block grant for special education funding, moving away from a reimbursement model, which I haven't seen new numbers, but we were higher than average, which means we're going to be looking at a reduction of revenue coming in, less money than we've had to cover special ed costs. When we look at the weighting study, if that goes into play, that will impact our budget. Maybe not a lot, maybe a little. Whatever they decide on a measure for poverty rate, what I think about is the reality of what we're facing as a system. We don't have any, never have we collected information on free and reduced eligibility for our students who are not attending one of our 6 schools. So I'm already dealing with how the heck am I going to get information on over 1,000 kids that I've never had to get it before. If you now add to that the fact that everyone's going to get free meals, we have reduced incentive for collecting that information. People are not motivated to submit that paperwork in order to give us that information because they're not going to be receiving any benefit. And some measure of poverty will be used, which has always been historically tied in some way to funding. So now I'll just say to you that should all of this happen, I don't know who's looking at the intersectionality of all of it, but I am. And I'm thinking to myself, how do we execute so that I am getting back accurate poverty information, because that's directly impacting our entire education spending model, and knowing I'm going to be getting less money for special education. So I'm saying this to you as a board, right? Like, I don't know whether you actually want to hear this during your discussion about this, but I feel compelled at this moment to share it with you. Yep. Because it's important for you to understand the legislation. It's also, I think, important for you to understand at least one perspective of how it might be affecting us in the years to come as a system, us, BRSU. So I'm sharing that with you, Sue. I'd love to, again, hear if you think I'm off on any of those comments. Okay, so you're in agreement. And I just think you should know that, because we could be looking at a very dire financial situation down the road, and the idea that maybe TNG and Meadowy won't be hit hard with the weighting study could be very different. And again, there's nothing wrong with any of these, right? These are all good things that are with the best of intentions for all the right reasons. And we still have to figure out how to create a budget and keep a tax rate that's reasonable for our taxpayers.
Yeah, I kind of present it sometimes as there are way too many good ideas out there, because almost all of them impact us and cost a significant amount of money. Dick, yeah.
Randy, the way I respond to these legislative pieces of information is that when you do, as you just did, weigh in on some of the practical concerns that I never get involved with, it causes me more concern that the legislation needs to be appropriately reviewed so that we don't have suddenly new mandates, that we don't suddenly have to do stuff that materially changes the flexibility you have to run the system the way it needs to be run. I think Jim's proposal to keep us informed helped to shape an initial reaction to the logic of the bill, but a formal board action would be shaped by an intersection between the practical implications as you perceive them and our genuine feeling about the usefulness of a bill. So I don't think that they're two separate. And I would be reluctant to suddenly write letters in any other than an individual basis responding to the law or the creation of a law or adding input. But as a board, you're going to play a huge role in that whole process.
Well, I think part of the whole idea here is you first have to understand the individual issues and bills to be able to then put them all together in the sort of, way that Randy's talking about. So David, sorry.
Well, I feel like we did that today, and I wanted to share that with Randy. I feel like when you responded to Brian Campion about the universal lunch and stuff, you mentioned that poverty data would be harder to get if they implement that. And I was referring to the intersectionality in certain ways. I didn't call it that, but we've got pre-K coming down the line. We've got healthcare increases that are out the wazoo. We've got teachers' retirement that's going to change the dynamics of all kinds of things. I didn't even mention special ed and waiting study. And so there's so much that are all together ratchet. COVID made the stress level among teachers, administrators, and everybody quite high, but this is all ratcheting it up even higher. And I don't think the legislators look at the big picture. I think they just see, oh, that's a good idea, let's do that.
Right.
And the schools can pay for it. It's like, guys. So yeah,
Well,
you're
that's-
right, Randy. You really need to push that, but we're not blind to that. That's why we both reacted today.
Yeah, and Randy wasn't a part of those communications, but we'll we can share a lot more of that. But I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm
we'll
happy to
move
send
forward on that.
letter around if you
Now,
want to see it.
Sue can also tell you she shot something out early this morning on a different issue that I didn't have on my list.
Yeah, but this is the boring topic, right? This is the finance stuff.
Not boring.
It's important though, and everybody should be aware that we have an issue with this and Sue's position on it.
It is, and it's unfortunate that the legislation that was passed a few years back required everybody in the state, all SUs, districts, et cetera, to participate in a school finance system that was selected by AOE. AOE selected a really, really poor system, one that does nowhere near it doesn't even do basic accounting functions. I don't want to go into what it can't do because it can't do so much, but many people who have been forced to implement the system, we are not one of them yet, are struggling, have struggled, they're settling for something that's much, much inferior to the product that they had before. There are some people who had a poor product and switched to this product, so they're better off, but there's more people who are not better off. And so there was our auditors audit many SUs in the state. They got involved to talk about the things that are going wrong in the districts with respect to reporting and the inability of some people to just do basic accounting functions. And there's legislation out there now to put a pause, which is what AOE recommends, on the project, and to push implementation back by 6 months, which those two things are great, but there's no sort of requirements on what does that really mean? What is required of the vendor to fix before we would continue implementation? What does the AOE have to do to prove that this is actually happening? The AOE has just done a poor job of managing this. I don't think it's due to any one person's fault, just because maybe they don't have enough staff. Maybe the system is just poor to begin with. I'm not part of implementation, so I don't know. But what we're asking the legislature to consider is making this a voluntary opt-in option, that if we already have a system and we can already report to the state the data that they need, which we can, then there's really no reason for us to have to switch our entire accounting system, which touches everything we do business-wise, right? So every single thing, it's not just payroll and paying the bills and putting a budget together. It's every single thing is touched by this system, human resources from start to finish, all of our expenses. It's the procedures that have to be recreated. Every single staff member has to learn a new system. It takes a really long time. It takes a lot of hours. And the system that we have now is good. So switching from it, it's very affordable. So switching from it to something inferior it's just going to be awful if we're forced to do it. So we're trying to get them to change the legislation.
Yeah, a key part of it is it's perfectly logical at the state level for them to want all the data that they need to come in a consistent manner to be able to manage it.
Yep.
And what Sue's saying is, great, we can do that without having to buy the system that you got us into that stinks and is going to take us several years to try to, try to incorporate if we had to. So it's the old, this is a situation where the goal of all this made perfect sense, but how you get there, then they put legislation in place that forces you to a very ugly place to get to to get to the solution that you have a much easier way to get to that solution. So to me, this is, we always, I'll bring it up again. We always talk, we don't want to be micromanaging Randy. And that's for a really, really good reason, because she knows her job better than we do, but we should be there to be helpful for her, support her, and etc. The legislature loves to micromanage things. And that's where we, I think, get into trouble. So.
From what Sue described, this sounds like a situation where, as a doctor, the operation was a success, but the patient died.
Exactly. Now I'm going to send you guys something else, which is there's David's seen it, the piece on pensions, David, because this is another issue that's about to blow up big time. It's been getting discussed in the legislature all year. Is we need to do something about our massively unfunded pensions. I wrote something. I was actually asked by the VSBA to go to the VSBA board to write something that, it's just providing a background on the issue. It's just here's where we are. Here are the facts. So I'm going to send that to you guys too, just to take a look and see if it's useful. And so I'll send you today's memo. I'll send you that. And I'll try to, going forward, make it available and for each of the boards if they want to use it at the board meetings. And I'm also happy, like I told Jolie, I told Jennifer as well, that if it fits with my schedule and you want me to come to a board meeting and be able to take questions, that's fine too. So okay, so that's legislation taking up most of our meeting. That's an unusual thing here. There's one other thing that I just wanted to mention, another VSBA related thing, which is last year we provided a resolution that got approved and is now in the VSBA resolutions on broadband access. If you guys remember that. We're coming into that season again, so we're looking for ideas. If you guys think of some big picture ideas or whatever, or little picture ideas that we might want to propose, that the VSBA try to make happen in the state this year. That whole resolution process, putting together a resolution, proposing it, and hopefully getting it into the VSBA resolutions, which define the work of the VSBA. You guys think about ideas, and this won't actually, it's like June that things will have to be in, but you kind of have to start thinking about it early if you have an idea and you want to discuss it. So think about that. If there's anything that you think is, kind of crazy the way it's happening now and it should be changed, bring that up. Okay. That was a long legislative and regulatory action thing. Okay. So anything else on that or other sort of topics? No, you're getting tired of this. Okay, so we have reflection on norms. Dick read the norms at the beginning of the meeting. Are we living up to the norms, do you think, or any feedback, complaints are always useful.
I don't have a complaint, but I feel like the sort of newsletter or sort of cliff notes that we were discussing, Jim, earlier, would really be a helpful thing in terms of, because one of the things I personally struggle with is I feel like I am not prepared enough often, and it's uncomfortable, and I don't like coming to meetings feeling that way. And it's not because I'm excessively lazy, I'm just your run-of-the-mill lazy. But in seriousness, I really encourage that. It would be so helpful to be able to sort of grab a condensed version. And I feel like everybody is independent enough that that we can, arrive at our own decisions, as David made earlier. So,
Yeah, I kind of think of that as the old flip the classroom. It's like, if you have the information ahead of time, then instead of hearing the information during the meeting, you can ask questions about the information.
exactly. Yes. Thank
Good
you.
deal. Okay. Okay, I guess we don't have any parents, staff, well, there are no onlookers here. We're not popular enough. Celeste, we don't have anybody, do we?
Correct. There's nobody.
Yep. Okay. So no. So I guess if nobody has anything else, then
So moved.
we certainly met. We at least, even without long discussion, we were well within our 2-hour time frame.
Second.
Okay. All in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Okay, that's everybody. Thanks very much, people.
Good to see everybody.
I'll be shooting you an email with